get started. My name is Kate Carlson. I'm an ESU 3 consultant. And here with us today also is Robbie Jensen. And then Derek Gangwish is also on here, which might be a familiar face for you guys as well. The plan today is to kind of give you some getting started tips with using Google Drive. But when you're talking about Google Drive, that doesn't just mean Google Drive. That also includes things like Google Docs and Google Sheets and Google Slides and Google Forms and more. But we're going to try and get through a lot in a little bit of time today, just to give you, hopefully give you just enough to be dangerous, so you can get started and come away with some tips and tricks for using those tools, using Google Drive and using some of the tools within Google Drive. So here's kind of our agenda. We're using the same agenda document that we've had for all of these Google ones. So if you've been to ones before, it's the same document. I think Tiffany had sent it out. It's got, you know, your Zoom link on there, all those kind of things. So I'm assuming you guys have found that. If you need a shortened link to it, this bit.ly will get you there, that bit.ly/www.google 2020. And here's kind of our rough agenda for today. We're going to start with Drive and then go to Docs, Forms, Slides. And if we've got some time, we'll do Sheets. That'll be a pretty quick one for sure. And so we'll squeeze that one in if we've got time. If not, we will leave that one for a future day and time. So before we get diving into Drive, wanted to get your self-assessment. So how would you rate your knowledge and comfort about Drive, Docs, Forms, Slide, Sheets, any of those things? So I'm going to ask you to go into the chat. And as you do that, I want you, you're going to have 3 parts to your answer. 1, I need you to tell me who you are. 2, I need you to tell me what you do at Weeping Water Public Schools. And then give us your self-assessment. Are you more of a, I have no idea on these things? Are you more of a, I got this? Or are you that ish in the middle? Like you've got a clue about it, or you've heard about it, but maybe you haven't used it as much, or you're just not quite comfortable saying, I got this. So if you wouldn't mind going into the chat and letting us know who you are, what you do at Weeping Water, and then kind of give us your self-assessment. And I realize your self-assessment might be varied based upon the tool, so you can give us as much or as little information as you would like. Okay. So yeah, we're running the gamut. I realize that ish is probably where a lot of you are going to lie about certain pieces, just because that is a pretty wide range. What's awesome about these is if you are familiar with the Microsoft equivalent, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, those 3, there's going to be a lot of crossover. It might be called something a little bit different. It might be located in a little bit different place where you find it. But there's a lot of pieces that are going to correlate. I kind of like to think of the Microsoft equivalent as whole milk, and a lot of the Google tools are getting to that 2%. So there might be some things that you can do and some of those other things that you can't necessarily do in Google, or you might have to use a little hack to get make it work. But for the most part, for most users, what you could do in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, you can do in the Google equivalent. Okay, so thank you for letting us know who's in the room and kind of letting us know what kind of things, where you're feeling as far as your knowledge and comfort level. We're going to get started with Drive, and I'm going to stop sharing because Robbie is going to take the driver's seat. Ha ha ha, pun intended.
Drive. Wow.
I know, super lame, right? Yeah.
Okay, hopefully you're all seeing my screen right now, maybe. Okay, I'm just sitting here staring at Chris Farley say no idea over and over. It's kind of making my day right now. But we're gonna jump into Drive. Drive, just from its basic, I love the honesty and just saying that we're kind of in this ish environment, in this ish world when it comes to Drive and all the tools. In its entirety, drive.google.com is your online hard drive. Since I started using Google, it doesn't matter what computer I jump on anymore because I always have all the files that I need as long as I can access the internet. My Google Drive houses everything that I use and store. Now you'll see I don't have much in this because this is my Weeping Water account, but my other accounts house every file that I might need when I'm in there. So today, when we look at Google Drive, we're really going to be looking at this storage warehouse of where you can keep all your content, but then also this ability to be able to create new content. Now, a couple things you'll notice, like we're often very familiar with having a flash drive or an external hard drive or something to keep some of our files, and we have to be concerned about storage. Because you are in a Google Apps for Education environment, you have no storage restrictions. You can store whatever digital file you want in Google Drive and back it up. I use this all the time, whether it's a video I'm making for an instructional piece in class, or whether it's just some documents that I've had to create and back up. I always store them inside of my Google Drive. So it's going to show you that you've used storage. That number really is irrelevant because in Google Apps for Education, you get unlimited storage in this environment. But I'm just going to tour you around Drive. And a lot of this is going to be beneficial if you have your Drive or your docs, whatever we're in today, have that open on one part of your screen and be watching our part of the screen. We can kind of walk you through this together today. So just to look around what your Drive looks like, by default, when you log in, and if it's your first time ever even getting to Drive, if you're in your email, you can always click this little app switcher, the little 3x3 waffle up here, and you can get down into all of the Google products. So Drive is just this little triangle right here, or you can navigate to drive.google.com to get there as well. But when I look around, I'm always logged into my Drive. This is your files, everything that you have access to. And in my Drive, if you start to have folders, you'll see a little drop-down triangle and you'll have some folders. If you attended the classroom trainings last week, you have a classroom folder now. Or if you've already set up your Google Classroom, you have those folders in there. But this is a way that you can start to organize and structure your Drive, is by having folders in here. We'll show you how to create those in a little while. What's unique about any of the Google products and inside of Drive is in an environment where we were used to like a Word doc where you'd have to email a copy of it, somebody would make edits, they would save that and send it back. You ended up with all these different Word documents. In this environment, we really can think of all of our documents as these living documents. No longer do we need to send like copy 1 to somebody and then somebody has version 2 and all this. It's a continuous running document or running presentation, whatever you're working on. Because of that, not all the files in here are going to belong to you. You will have a lot of files, and I see a section here called Shared with Me. These are files that others have created and shared with me that I now have access to. And we'll talk a lot about those sharing settings as we jump into our Google Docs here in a little bit. Now, I know some of you have a lot of other files. You've been creating PowerPoints, you've been creating Word docs, all those types of pieces that you now want to bring into a Google ecosystem. And a great way to do that is to be able to upload those files right into Google. Before I do that though, my goal in bringing a file into Google is to make it a new living document. And to do that, I can convert files that I bring over into a Google tool if there's an applicable piece. So if it's a Word doc, I can convert it to a Google Doc. Or if it's a PowerPoint, it'll convert easily into a Google Slides presentation. So to do that conversion though, I do need to explore my settings. So in Google, most times settings is going to be this gear icon. I'm going to click on my settings here, and I'm going to go down and click on settings one more time. In Google Drive specifically, there's not a ton of settings, but the one I want you to know about is this convert uploads. If you check convert uploads, this is what will take any of those files that you have in Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and convert them to the Google equivalent when you bring it in. So I'm going to check that. And the reason I do that is so I can edit it and modify it inside of my Google ecosystem now as well. You'll see that there are a few other settings in here. Really, Google Drive doesn't have a ton of settings. So I'm just going to check that, make sure I'm done. And again, here's that storage, but remember that doesn't mean anything because you have unlimited storage. Now for me, this tiled view can get really ugly really fast as soon as you start to get more files. Right under where my settings gear was, I have this kind of little different icon here, and I can go into a list view. This will give me a few more details about the files that I have access to. I can see who owns that file, when it was last modified, and if it's taking up any size. You'll notice anything like this Google Doc assignment here, it takes up no space. Any Google files take up no space, but you'll see that if you have a PDF or a video file, audio file, those will take up space. Google does give you this quick access section as well. In quick access, you can see the last things that you had open. And so this is really nice. Or if you have something that's attached to a meeting, so maybe it's meeting notes, it'll notice and it'll take that information and say, hey, here's something you might need access to because you have a meeting in 10 minutes that has this attached to the Google Calendar invite. So they've done some really cool things with quick access. Along the left side, we're in my drive right now. We do have the ability here to have shared drives. So some people will use a shared drive to create an entire little house for all these files to live. What we have found with shared drives is, and I'm going to open up a different Google version of myself. It's like my multiple personalities here. There we go. So if we look into my ESU3 here and I go to shared drives, you can see I have all these different drives for different groups that I'm a part of. Now, what these drives do is one issue that happened early in Google is if somebody created a file and they shared it with you, but then they left a district or their account moved from the district in some capacity, that file left with it, even though it was shared with other viewers. What these shared drives do is these actually make the drive the owner of that file after you share it into here. So you do have this ability in Drive to share these files, and then if a staff member leaves, then you don't have to worry about those files leaving with them. Those files all stay with the drive no matter how long you have that drive. So shared drives can be beneficial. Some people use them a lot. Some people don't use them, but they are there. I'm going to minimize that and go back to my Weeping Water one here. In your drive, you also have this ability to have a priority file. We have a few people who really like to use these. Priority has an environment here called workspaces. And if you have a bunch of files around one specific topic, you can create a workspace that's around that. So sometimes we have some staff who, if they have a big training coming up, they'll put all those files in there. Or maybe you have a big project that you work with students on. You want to keep all those files together in a workspace. Others organize it very differently. Some use folders, some use different spaces. I know Kate and I were just talking about workspaces and priority. This isn't part of our workflow. We do things like using stars to indicate files that we might need later. But workspaces is an option when you're in here. And then on the left side, you'll also see things like shared with me, recent, and starred. A starred file is one that you can just add a star to, and when we're in Docs or one of the other services, we'll show you how to star it. And then the last one is trash. If you delete an item, it'll stay in the trash for 30 days or if you empty the trash. So you can have it there. I honestly don't remember the last time I deleted a file just because I don't care about storage. So I just let it keep going. But there is a trash there if you need it. So that's really a kind of a quick overview. Now to jump into Google Docs, there's a couple ways that we can jump into Google Docs. Kate's going to take you into Google Docs, but I want to show you this new button right here before we do that. In new, you have the ability to add a folder. So if you want to have a folder where all your files live, you can just click on new folder. This is also where you can upload files and folders. You can upload any file from your computer. If it is a Word doc or PowerPoint, it'll convert. If it's a picture file, you can just upload it. It brings it in. You'll see in the bottom corner that it's uploading, and then it puts that file into your Google Drive for you. Then you also have the ability to create new documents of any of the Google tools. So you'll see by default, it always has Docs, Sheets, and Slides on top. And under More, you'll see some of the other Google services that you have the access to be able to create in. Today, we're going to cover a few of these. We won't have time to get to all of them. But this is a good spot to go ahead and start your Google Doc. So from there, I'm going to let Kate jump in and start to talk a little bit about Google Docs. And she's going to show you some other ways to start a new doc or to see all of your docs as well. So I will stop my share and hand it to Kate.
Awesome. As we're doing the little screen share swap, if there are any questions, feel free at any time to shout them out. If you have any questions about Drive and want to put those in there, you can shout them out if you want. You can put them in the chat. Whatever works.
Awesome. Yeah. So while she's transitioning that, Tiffany shared in here that you have a lot of shared drives that are in there. So you're going to want to make sure that you get into shared drives and see all the pieces that you have access to. And different people can have different shared drives. And we'll talk about sharing settings here in a little bit, but know that that shared drive section is going to be important to you.
All right. So I'm going to get to where Robbie left off. So here's my drive. You'll notice mine looks a little bit different than his, that the one he had. And that is the awesome thing about Drive. Like you can really personalize how it works for you, and it still functions in the same way. So this is kind of where Robbie left off, and he kind of showed you how you can click new and docs. That is one way that you can get to a new Google Doc. You can also just open up a new tab and go to docs.google.com. I know we've said this in multiple things. Most of the websites for Google, it's whatever the tool is, .google.com. So docs.google.com, drive.google.com. They also just recently, there's a couple different other ways that you can get a new doc if you need a new word processing document. You can open up a new tab and just type doc.new, and it will load a new doc automatically if you're signed into Google Doc. It also works for the plural of docs. So if you do docs.new, it will automatically open up a new Google Doc if you're signed into your Google account. So that is it's been around for maybe a few months. So super easy way. So as with anything in Google, there's going to be lots of different ways to do the same kind of thing. So here's my new Google Doc. You will notice if you are familiar with Word, there's a lot of things that look very familiar. Like I've got this ruler toolbar. I've got some menu choices. I've got a toolbar here with icons. All those kind of things are there. You'll notice when you start a new doc, it gives it the oh so helpful title of Untitled Document. But if I click up here, I can rename this. So if I say and as soon as I click away from it, you'll notice it says right here, saving. As long as you are connected to the internet, you will never see a save button in Google Docs. It is constantly saving. Every change you make every few seconds, it will save. And so I can see these little icons here on the side to kind of give me some information about this document. Robbie had mentioned using the star feature. They also have that feature in Gmail. I think we mentioned about that one earlier too when we were talking about Gmail, but you can star something if it's really important and then unstart when it's no longer relevant. I can see where this file is. So right now this is going to be in my drive because I started it from there. But if I want to move it around to a different folder or any of those kind of things, I can always click on this and I can move it right here, right with the document open. You can also do that in Drive, but I can do it right here with the document in here. And then this little icon will tell me the document status. So it will tell me, is everything saved in Drive? If I'm working on a document and I'm not going to be around an internet connection, I can always say, make this one available offline. I can do my work on it offline. And then when I get back to internet connection, it will sync all those changes with my Drive. So that could be a very helpful thing if you've got students who are working on documents and they may be working on them somewhere where they don't have Wi-Fi. So while they're on Wi-Fi, tell them to turn it on for offline use, and then they can make those changes and not have to have the internet. Same for any user. And then right here, it will tell me like how long ago those changes were saved. Okay, so let's kind of talk about the layout here. You'll notice here's your menu bar, and I highly encourage you when you get some time, just kind of click on those and see what kind of things are available. I think a lot of times when you just see some of those things in those menu choices, you can see some of the capability. And kind of encourage you to have that demo documents. Just start clicking around, start seeing, what happens if I go and change a different mode? What happens if I turn off that ruler, or if I want to bring it back? You really cannot break it. So have that demo document, that sandbox document where you just play with things. One thing to note, here's your toolbar. You have a bunch of different icons, and any of those things, if you hover over them, it will show you or tell you what it does. This will change. So if I was on a smaller computer screen, it might not show me all of those things. And so if it's a smaller screen, let me move my screen a little bit smaller here. So you'll notice now I don't see all the same tools I saw before, but I have these magic 3 little more dots. Any of those snowmen, if it's a vertical snowman or a snowman fallen flat, if you click on those, it gives you more hidden features. So if you're on a screen that's a little bit smaller and you don't see all the tools that you thought you should be seeing, look for that. Same thing if I have a picture or something. If I have something selected in my document, some of the tools that I have will change as well, based upon what I have selected or where my cursor is. So that toolbar might change depending on what's happening there. Other things you'll notice is side panel. That's something that should look familiar to you. You have that same side panel in Google and Drive, you have it in Gmail, you have it in Calendar, but I can always click on this. So if I'm typing something in a document and I need to see my calendar, I can just pop that out on the side and see my calendar right there. If you want to hide it, there's a little arrow in the corner where you can hide that side panel if you don't need it anymore. Other things that are kind of here, you can see obviously your document in the middle. This little icon over here, you can show the document outline. So as you're typing a document, it will start to try and guess an outline of your document, and it will show a document here, which can be great for those ongoing documents. For example, we have one that's got our department meetings that happen every month, and it's an ongoing agenda for the whole year. And if we are in May and I want to go back to January, that's a lot of scrolling to get down to January. So I can use these things and I can quickly and easily navigate in a long document. We'll get to how you can set that up with specific outlines, but Google will try and read your mind if you don't set something. Other things down here. Down here in the bottom corner is this Explore button. It is an awesome feature. You can do a search for a website, for a picture, for a resource right within the document. So you don't have to go to another tab and go to google.com to search for something. You can search right within here. So for example, if I want to search for penguins, I can search for that. So you'll notice I can search the web, I can search for images, or I can even search for something in my drive right here. I don't have to go back to Google Drive. So let's say, for example, if I say images and I want to put this image in my document, if I click on, whoop, there we go. If I click on the image, come on. Here, I'll just drag it over. There we go. And then I can just drag it in there. The nice part is when I'm searching for images in the Explore feature, it will only give me the ones that I have the copyright to use. So it kind of filters out the ones that are copyright protected. So super awesome there. Another thing I want to point out that's a very important plot point is the share button in the upper right hand corner. This is what really puts the magic in Google Docs and any of the Google products. If I click on this share button, right, or if I hover there, right now it says this document is private just to me. So I'm the only one who sees it. If I click on the share button, now I have some options here. I can share it with specific people. So if I want to share this document with Robbie, if I could spell his name, that would be awesome. And I can pick him from a list. Once I select him, I can decide what kind of rights he gets. So do I want him just to be able to see it? Do I want him to be able to see it and make comments on it? Or the most open would be if he can edit. So that means he can make the same kind of changes to the document as I did. I can send him a message and say, hey, here's our document for today. Take a look at it. Let me know what you think. And then it will send him an email telling him that I've shared that document with him. So you can share it with specific people. You can also say, I don't care who, I just want to say, right now, only people listed up here can do this. But if I want to change that, I can click on this little blue right here. And right now this says anyone at Weeping Water Public Schools with this link can view it. So they have to be signed into their Weeping Water account and they have to have the link. So they have to have those two pieces and then they can only view it. I can click here and say, I want to say anyone who has the link. So they don't have to be signed into a specific kind of account and I want them to be able to edit. So this would be the most wide open that you can probably get. Okay, so as long as they have the link and they have internet, they can edit the document. And then I can copy the link if I want. So if I need to send the link to the document, I can always copy and paste and put that wherever I put links. So if I want to send this document home to parents, I can say, get that link, and I can send that home and they can view it. If you are sending something to someone outside of your district, so outside of Weeping Water, people who have Weeping Water accounts, you want to make sure that you have anyone with the link so they don't have to sign in to an account to see it. And you'll notice the share icon changed now. And so I can always hover my mouse over there and see kind of a little snippet of what those share settings are. All right, so I'm going to get rid of that picture and close the Explore tab. The other thing I wanted to know, oh, I'm going to bring that picture back. Just hit the undo button up there. You'll notice when I clicked on the picture, you notice my toolbar changed a little bit. The other thing that's an important plot point when you are navigating in Google Docs is the right click. So if you're using a mouse, you can just right click on your mouse. If you're using a trackpad, typically it's a 2-finger tap. Or on a Mac, if you do control click, that should bring up that secondary menu. And so you'll notice anytime if I'm in a document, if I right click, I get some additional features. So I can crop the image from here, I can replace it, all cut, copy, paste, all those kind of things. So whenever you're in a doc or sheets or slides or whatever, don't forget about that right click. Many times you can find a lot of good features right there. All right, so let's get rid of that. Okay, so a couple things about the toolbar. So let me get some text in here. All right, so let's see, going across here, this is those styles. So let's say if this is my heading, if I click on this and go up here to styles and I say, I want to make that the title, you'll notice it automatically adjusts the format. And so then maybe this is our August agenda. So I do August and I highlight August and I say that is going to be a heading. Okay, so it kind of adjusts the format for me. And now you'll notice if I click that document outline, now it has those headings that I just did. So you can use the styles to really personalize. If I don't like what they did, because sometimes I don't like their stuff. Let's say if I go down here and do September. Oh, that's a new feature. You'll notice many times when you're in Google, you'll sign in one day and it'll look one thing and you'll sign in the next day and there's something new. And usually they try and give you a little pop-up for it. Sometimes they don't. They are now adding Smart Compose to Google Docs. It's been available in Gmail. Now it's available in Docs. And so it starts giving you writing suggestions as you are typing. You can go in and manually turn it off, but that would be something each individual user would have to go in and manually turn it off. So it's kind of an important plot point. If you're using this with students, they get that Smart Compose too, which can be awesome. But then you kind of have to decide if you want them to have that, but they are in control of whether they turn that on or off in their account. So it's not something you can say, okay, for all my students, I want this to be off for this assignment. It's kind of one of those things, it's available to them. Okay, so I'm going to say, got it, but they can go in and turn that off. And you'll notice, look at this little pink cursor. And if I put my thing on there, Robbie is in this document. So we are in here together, editing together. So it is truly collaborative. So there's not that, here's my version 1 and I send it to Robbie, he makes changes and sends back version 2. You'll notice, so you can have multiple people in a document at once. I think the limit is it 50 editors in at once, but you can have more people than that viewing.
Yeah, 50 editors and 500 viewers.
There you go. So you can have everybody in the car all at the same time. So if I decide I want a different style, I kind of got off track there. So if I click on September and I make it bold and I change the font, so you'll notice I've got some fonts here. Let's make this Merriweather, and I want to make it the text color. I want to make it purple. And I want to highlight it with yellow in the background. Okay, so if I say every time I type the month and the heading, I want that text to be the same way. If I click on that and click on this normal text and I say I want to make that the heading, if I hover my mouse over this little side arrow and I say update heading 1 to match, now every time I turn that style to that heading, it will automatically do that. So if I go to October and I go up here, and it will do that just for this document. So if you don't want to be bound by their preset text features like the size, all those kind of things, You can make it however you want and then say, I want this heading 2 to match whatever that is. So you are in control there. But now you'll notice once we have some of those styles in there, when I click on the document outline, now I see and I can navigate quickly and easily. So if I click on September, it automatically takes me to that part in the document, which is not a big deal if we have this half-page one. But if you've got a 20-page document, easier to navigate. Yeah.
Hey, does that setting change then apply to the next new document that you open, or do you have to reset it each time you have a new doc?
You would have to reset it. I think you can go in here to options down here and say, save it as my default style. And so then the next time you open a document, it would, or you can say, I just want to use normal, but I'll change it just for this document. So kind of up to you.
Perfect.
Yeah. And if there is something that gets here in this side thing that you don't want to be in that document outline, I can always click on the X and say, I don't want that in that outline on the side. So you have some control over here about this outline, and then you can close it when you don't need to see it. Don't need to see it anymore. Some other things. Oh, fonts. You get a handful of them, but if you want, you can always click on this more fonts and they have more available. And so you can say, these are the ones I want. These are the ones I don't. So maybe if I want this one and I want that one, and I can say I want, and look, there's even more. So you are, you got quite a few. Maybe I want that one. Or if I decide I don't want this one, I can always click on that and decide what fonts I want to be available. That Zoom toolbar is always exactly where I don't want it to be. Okay, there we go. And so now when I go to here, now some of those ones that I added are here. Let's see, other things you can do. Commenting. So if I highlight on this, you'll notice as soon as I highlight something, this little comment button happens here. It's also available up here if I need it. But if I click on comment, I can make a comment on that. And then one important plot point, you actually have to click on the comment button so it posts that comment. And so maybe if a student sent you a document, you can comment on their work and say, hey, double check your subject verb agreement on this sentence or something like that. So you can really make it a conversation. Your student can actually go in. Robbie, you want to go in on that comment and then reply to that comment? So you can have a ongoing conversation based upon this comment, which is super, super awesome there. I can also actually, and you'll see that's what, and so we can have an ongoing conversation going. You can also, even if I go into comments and I say, I want Robbie to pay particular attention to this. If I've had the plus button and start typing Robbie's name, there he is. I can say, can you take this meeting for me? And so it will actually send him an email saying, hey, you were mentioned in a comment. And I can even say, I want to assign this task to Robbie. And I can say assign, and then he gets an email saying something's been assigned to you. And he can go in and when he's done, mark it as done. One thing to note, of course. One thing to note, maybe we talked about this, we agreed on a time, I can click the check mark and that comment goes away. One important plot point, if you are using this with students and you've made comments to them, maybe it's a piece of writing and you want them to make all these editing and changes and I had these students who would do this, I swear. I would make comments and they would make none of those changes. They could just go in and say, yep, did it, do all this checking and not actually make those changes. And you might be wondering, well, they marked them off to say they do them. Did they really do them? Right up here next to the share button, you can open up the comment history and you can see those comments, even if they marked them as done. You can say, well, I asked you about this and I don't see anything different. So what happened here? So just because when you check those off, you think those comments go away, you can always go back to get them if you need them. And so I can see on this one, if I need to, I can reopen that discussion and it brings it right back. So kind of a useful kind of thing if you're using this, especially with students.
Can I chime in on the comments piece for a second?
Absolutely, please do.
Yeah, so last week when we did Classroom, we talked about comments in the grading section as well. So if you make those inline comments, if you're grading a Google Doc inside of Google Classroom, it'll show up in this comment section that Kate's been showing. It's if you do the ones in the document. On your gradebook in Classroom, there was the ability to make additional comments on the grade itself. But if you do any of them inline, they'll appear the same way that all the comments Kate was doing there too.
Thank you. Some other things you can do in a document. The great power is that because this is it's basically a website, this is all web-based, I can add links. So if I can click on this word October, I can make that word a link. So maybe if I click on that, and you'll notice I can navigate to different parts of a document. So maybe I want to navigate and connect October to September. And so when they click on October, it actually takes them back up to the September part of the document. So you can navigate and put links to different bookmarks essentially in your document. You can also add links to websites. So I can say, I want this one to go to omaha.com. So now when anyone clicks on that, they can click on it and see. And you'll notice if I kind of hover my mouse there, it gives me a little synopsis of it. I can also link to other Google Docs. So let me pull up this one. I'm going to get the link to that. And I'm going to click here on the link and I'm going to say paste that. And so I can link to other things. So maybe here's our December meeting and I can link the slides to our meeting notes right there so that no one has to go somewhere else to find them. And you'll notice it gives me a little preview. And look at this, I can click on there and I can say open it in preview and I can take a look at those things right here. I don't have to pop out into a different tab. I can open it up in a new tab if I want, or I can just close it there. And so you can see that little preview there. It tells me some details about that file, that I'm the owner, that no one's made any changes to it. So all those kind of things you can link in there using that link. Other things you can do, you can insert an image. These are all the places that you can pull images. So you can upload one from your computer. You can search the web. It kind of pops out that Explore tool. I can pull one from Drive. I can take a webcam. So I can use the webcam on my computer to take a picture and add it, which can be a great way for students to send in evidence of work. So maybe you're having them work on math problems and you say, insert the picture of you holding up, question 7. And so they can be writing it out on paper. And they pull up question 7, let me get out of some, and they can hold up their webcam and take a picture of it and insert that picture. So a great way to kind of do a little formative check. So using that, so if you say insert camera, they can pick it. They might have to give permission or authorize the camera to be used. But other than that, they should be good to go. Whoop, didn't mean to actually click it. There we go. Cancel. Okay. Other things, here's some alignment tools, those kind of things. You do have 3 different modes that you can have when you're working on a document. Editing, obviously you're editing it. Viewing, you're just taking a look at. And the in-between, if you make suggestions, it doesn't automatically make those changes. It just says any edits that you make become suggestions. So maybe that's a way if you want to help a student with some work, you can make your edits suggestions for them and they can decide to take your suggestions or not. So just some different modes that you can do there. Let's see. So that's the toolbar. Most of the tools, I do want to point out just a few things in some of the menu choices. Under the file menu, one thing that's an important one is this make a copy. So let's say I have a document and I want to reuse it, but make some changes for the next year. I've got last year's version, but I do want to have one for this year. I can say whatever this document is, I want to make a copy of it. Or maybe Robbie shared a document with me, but I want to make a copy for myself. I can take his document and I can go file, make a copy. Even if I'm just a viewer, I have access to file, make a copy. So they can say file, make a copy. It will tell me to name it. Where do I want to save it? What kind of things do I want to have come with it? And then I say, okay, and it gives me a copy of that document that's mine, that I'm the owner of. So that can be a very helpful thing. You'll also notice you have this download button. So if you are working on a Google Doc and you want to send it home to parents, well, not all parents, sometimes Google Docs might be a little bit funny with people trying to open them up on a mobile device. So you can actually type it in Google Docs and download it as a PDF. You could download it as an EPUB. So if you wanted to read it on an e-reader, or you can download it as a Word doc. So if you had something in Word, that there was a feature in Word that you couldn't find in Google Docs, or you just want to do this in Word, you can actually download it, open it up in Word, and go about making some changes there. Another important one that I love with Google Docs is that version history. I would have loved, Google Docs was just coming to be really used when I left the classroom, and this would have been so helpful with students. I can always go here and say, see the version history, and it will show me history of all the changes that were made, and it will tell me who made those changes if they are signed in. So I can see all the changes that Robbie made. You'll notice Robbie's changes are in purple, and if I want to see more detail, I can expand it, and it will show me different ones. So every one of these is a different version. I can see the things that have been added and changed. And if I decide, oh, we made all these changes, but I don't like those last 5 or 6 things that we did, I can always click on one of those and say, this is where I want it to be. And I can say restore it. And so almost like you're going back in time. I also would love this one. So if I had a collaborative doc with all my students in there together, and there was always that one kid that thought they would type something that's funny that really wasn't funny, I could go in and see who was the kid who made that comment. And so even if they made it and like, ooh, man, I shouldn't have done that, and they delete it, I can still see that in the version history. So that can be an important thing when you have lots of people in a document together, and see those kind of things. I also would use this as a way, you know, if I had some student work that just didn't sound like theirs, I could go in the version history, and if the first thing, like within 10 seconds, they all of a sudden have, you know, 5 paragraphs, that's probably an indication that might be something to investigate to see if they copy and paste it or something like that. And so, you know, because most people can't type 5 paragraphs in 30 seconds. So just using those, some kind of version history, just are some things. I don't think I'd necessarily open it up on every student document they submit, but if you needed it, like if you had some question, or like, hey, what, you know, when did they work on this, or what kind of, you know, look at the draft, or sometimes for students, go in and see, okay, go back to the first version and see your first draft, and you've made all these changes since then, so you can use it as a way to compare first draft with last draft, all those kind of things that you can do. And you can even name the version. So I can click on this one and say the best one. And I can say, this is our October version. So like, remember how we said, you know, sometimes you have like version 1, version 2, version 3, you can name those. So instead of just the time and date stamp, you can actually name those if you want to have some more detail there. All right, I'm going to click the back arrow to get back out of the version history. Some other things in the file menu that are noteworthy is this page setup. Hold on, let me get my Zoom toolbar out of the way. There we go. Okay, so page setup. Here's where you can change your margins. You can do portrait, landscape, paper size if you want. You can also change the page color. So white is the default, but if I wanted something, maybe I wanted it to be red or whatever, I can say, okay, and now it's red, which is pretty offensive to the eyes right now. But I can go in and do that, make it a gray. So you can make this, so if, you know, if this is a digital document and you're not printing it anyway, you can really kind of play around with the colors and see what really works and make things stand out. And you don't have to worry about what does it cost for the color copier. You can put all kinds of color on here because that is right there online, and you can have it go on for days. Or I've seen some teachers where they go in and change the page setup and put it to landscape and just kind of take advantage of some more screen real estate. Because right now this gray space over here is kind of wasted screen real estate. And so if you're working with kids and you've got a laptop, that's a horizontal. So make it, you aren't limited to that standard 8.5 by 11. So you can make those changes and really utilize your screen space. So then you can get more things up here, and that's less scrolling for students, less scrolling for you. Which if you're even if you're taking 5 seconds to scroll, 5 seconds times 25 kids times 6 class periods, that's a lot of scrolling that you're doing. So any of those things that you can do to maximize that top space without having to scroll is helpful too. So you can use that page setup for that.
Can I add one thing about page setup?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that whole color piece, my former life, I was an elementary teacher, so I put that lens on a lot. I use page colors a lot. When I use them specifically to tell my students, like, hey, remember that pink page? Just like I would make a copy on a yellow piece of paper because that's the one that they're going to use for their rubric. I color the backgrounds of my Google Docs a lot too. So when I'm talking or referencing it to my students, I can say, remember when we were in the yellow doc last week and we were talking about our autobiographies? then I can go in and have them do that. So I use page color a lot to bring back those memories for the students and to help them understand which document I'm even talking about. Because the more you use these docs, the more that students are gonna be like, which doc was that even in? Those color pieces really help me. I use color a lot inside of Google Docs.
That's great that you mentioned that. And if I go back to Drive, when I see this document, now granted, it's only saving my changes within when it was read, of course. But if I have on this or grid view, I can see a little thumbnail. So you might tell your students, go to your Drive, switch to grid view and search for, like, look for that blue color. So it's that visual if you're using grid view in Google Drive as well, which can be awesome.
And you'll see we use colors in our tables even for like our agenda today. So we can say this week we're in the blue section of that agenda. We use color to drive your attention in different places a lot.
Absolutely. Okay, so other things that are kind of useful in the, I think, is it insert? Oh, here we go. In the view menu, there is an equation editor. It's not super robust, but it's something. You can say, show that, and you can put in some different operators. So if you're a math or science teacher, that can be a great way to utilize some of those features. So they do have that little equation editor. There's some other third-party tools that you can use, but highly encourage you to check out the ones that are built right within Google Docs just natively. And I can always click on the X to hide it there. In the insert menu, some things, here's that image again. You can insert tables. That's a great way. If I'm doing this with students and I want them to respond, I'm going to get my cursor where I can see some things here. If I go to insert and say table, let's say I'm going to ask them 2 questions. I'm going to say, here's the question and here's where I want them to put their answer. So maybe question number 1 is 2 plus 4. And I'm going to say 3 plus 3. And maybe I make the answer blanks. I'm going to highlight there and I'm going to go up here to background color. So you'll notice when I'm in the table, my toolbar across the top changes. So now I have some of these fill things. So I can go over here and highlight, and I can say, make the background color of that yellow. And so it really stands out so that my students visually see, here's where, and I'm giving them an answer blank where I want them to put their answer. Big, that's a big kind of mindset shift if you're doing a digital assignment versus a print one. If I was a print one, I'd have to hit the return key a couple times to give them some space on the page to put their answer. Here I don't, but I'm giving them a place to put it. And I can even put whatever font I want. And then when they get it, they can highlight and do all those kind of things. So as you're creating digital assignments for your students, those are some things you can use tables and those kind of things to do that. Also in the insert menu, I can insert a drawing. Let me get out of my table so it doesn't put it in there. If I go to insert and I say drawing and I say new, this is actually kind of like a paint board space for me to put things. So I can insert images. So let's do an image of, and you'll notice I can upload, I can do a search. So if I'm going to search for the United States map. Okay, and I want one that's not labeled. Let's get this bright, colorful one. So if I click it and say select, and now it's going to put that image in my drawing. And then I can even put circles and shapes on it. So let's say I want to put a circle. And now I'm going to make that transparent so it makes it a circle. And let's make it a big, heavy circle. So right there, and so you can just keep adding layers of things on here if you want. You can add text, all those kind of things. But then as soon as I click save and close, it's going to put that as an image in my document. So it kind of gives you a little bit more desktop publishing feel to it. Because I don't know, in Word, in Google Docs, it doesn't matter. When I try and put images and things, it can be a nightmare. So I can kind of layer things and do that right within here. And actually with students, I could tell them, put the circle, and maybe I'm going to double click on that to put it back in here. I'm going to put a text box, label it, and say, move the circle to, let's say, Idaho. Okay, and so save and close. Now, if I were to send this to my students in classroom, say make a copy for each student, they could actually click on it. Students would get their copy. They could double click on this. They could take that circle, move it, And now that's how they mark their answer for that one. So you can kind of use this in combination with Classroom or in combination with different things to use that insert drawing. So super awesome feature there. All right, so other things in the insert menu, I mean, you've got special characters if you want to include like emojis. Emojis are available in special characters. Some more enhanced math kind of things would be available in there. You've got headers, footers. Here's that bookmark. So if you have a big long document and you want to say, you know, page 7 is a bookmark, you can do that. You can also add a table of contents at any point in the page. So maybe at the top, you could add a table of contents. It's very similar to this document outline on the side. So if you start training your students to use that, you start kind of getting in the habit of using that outline, you wouldn't necessarily need to add a table of contents, but if you needed to, that is definitely a feature that you could add. Some other things that are available, this tools menu's got some pretty awesome things. You've got word count, spelling and grammar, all those kind of things. Here's that explore feature again, but that's down in the bottom corner. If you have a document that you need to translate, you can click on translate document and it will basically make a copy of this one and it will call it, you know, translated copy of this document. You can pick your language. You've got quite a number of choices. But let's say if I do, let's say German. And then I say translate. Now, this is not 100%. This is using Google Translate, but it will still keep my document. And so you notice I've got this, my demo document is over here. So that's my original here. Here's my translated copy. I just open it up in a new tab. And so you'll notice here's my translated copy. And then I can send that out. So it's still my original. Now, if I go back and make changes to my original, I'm going to have to go through and translate again. This translate, when it makes a copy, it's almost like you put it in the copy machine and it shot out a copy in German. So it makes a copy at this point in time. Same thing if you do that file, make a copy, it makes a copy at that point in time. So if you go back and make any changes to the original, that copy doesn't reflect those changes. So same thing with this one. So if you need documents in a different language, you can utilize that. Also in the tools menu, you've got voice typing. So let me get my cursor somewhere here. All right, so if I go to tools and I say voice typing, it's gonna bring this little microphone here. And we'll see how this works when I'm screen sharing and got all kinds of things going. But as soon as I click the microphone, I have to give permission. I can use my voice to type what I want to say instead of having to use my hands on the keys, period. This is so cool, exclamation point. It can also be great for students to use, period. And then I turn that off. And so you'll notice it put that there. And so your students can use that as well. At one time, that was only available if you were using Chrome. I haven't tested that lately to see if that's still the case, but so if you go into tools and you look for voice typing and it's not there, maybe double check to see what browser you're using. When it first came out, it was limited to just Chrome. But then you can also turn on different languages, those kind of things. So that could be a great support feature if students are typing so that the keying part of it doesn't have to get in the way. They can use their voice to get the content there, and then they can do formatting and editing and those kind of things from there. Also in the tools menu, you can adjust some preferences. So you can say what kind of things you want. Here's where you can turn off that Smart Compose if you want that off. You can also do some substitutions. So students can set those to maybe if they have a really long email address. And so when they're in Google Docs, if they type, my school email or whatever, it will replace it. So you can kind of adjust what autocorrect substitutions happen there as well. Or you can, turn off automatically correct spelling, those kind of things. Add-ons are interesting. Add-ons add features to Google Docs. There's add-ons specifically for Google Docs. There's add-ons for Sheets, Slides. So there's ones for different kinds of tools. They are third-party created. So typically they are not created by Google. So I don't use a whole lot of add-ons. I think I did at one time, and now Google has been adding so many different features that a lot of the add-ons I use I really didn't need. Or no longer needed, but I can always go in here and say get add-ons, and you can see what kinds of ones are available. Kaizena is kind of a cool one. You can give audio feedback. If you're a music teacher, this flat one can be awesome because you can do music notation right within there. There is a more robust equation editor. So there's different ones that are available, and so you can check those out. But do keep in mind those are third-party created, and typically you have to give permission to access what it needs to access in order to function. So just a caveat, or if your Google is acting weird and you just installed an add-on, you can always go in and remove that add-on and see if that was the culprit there. The last thing here under the help menu, if you need any kind of help right within the tool, you can get it there. There's training resources right within there. Or if you're like, hey, this doesn't look how it looked the last time I got in there, you can always click on this updates and it will show you month by month what updates have happened with Google Docs. And so you can always check out if you're curious about what has changed, or you can just search for menus like, where is that? How would I do that? That's some help built right within there. So lots of features, highly encouraged, give it a try. It is amazing. Like I literally live in Google Docs right now. I was a business teacher. I was a Word master. Like I knew Microsoft Word up and down, and I can't tell you the last time I opened up Word. Because this is where we live and work, and the ability to share and all the features and functionality that have been added, and that collaborative piece has been so amazing. The last thing I want to show you is right here in this upper right hand corner, you can get back to your Docs home. So if I click on that, it takes me to kind of my drive, but it's kind of a filtered view. So it will just show me just the documents in my drive. I can also get there. Here's that same grid waffle app picker. I can click there and I can get to Docs Home there, or I can just go to docs.google.com, and so I can see my documents. But also while I'm there, you'll notice there's this template gallery. And so it gives me some of them here, but I can click on this. And if I click on the general, here is a bunch of templates that I can use. And they're kind of sectioned. There's letter templates, resume templates, work kind of ones. They've got some education ones, I think, somewhere in here. Are they at the top? Yeah, there's some education-based ones. You can also have ones that are unique to Weeping Water Public Schools. So if you guys have a letterhead or something, if you've got a document you think this would be a great template, you can actually submit that, and then others can use it. And basically when they use it, it just makes a copy, and then they can fill in their own information. But you've got those, and you've got just general ones that come from, that are created by Google. So that template gallery is amazing and worth checking out. Can be a great support scaffold for students too, as they're maybe creating a report or something like that. So if you're a template fan, highly encourage those. Any questions? I know that was kind of Docs by fire hose. I'm gonna stop sharing here. Any kind of questions on some of those kind of things, or anything related to Docs, that burning question you might have before we maybe take a little break here?
Can I jump in? And, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I had a quick question. Yep. Is there a way to set your default for your font back when we were looking at the text fonts? I can play around and look after you kind of showed us where to do that, but I was just curious if you had a quick answer for that one.
Yep. I don't know. I think you can. I feel like you can, but I've never tried to.
Yeah, so let's do that really quick here. I can show you since I got my screen sharing right now.
Perfect. Thanks, Robbie.
Of course. Yeah, so pick the font you like, and I'm just gonna.
Nunito.
Ooh, fun. So we go in and you pick the one that you want here, and whatever one you pick. Right now, when you start typing a general document, you're always under this format of normal text. So we talked about the ability to use that formatting and keep it. Well, if I go in and I say, testing words right here, the words I have, I'm gonna say that every time I use it, I want to use Architect's Daughter just because I think the font name is hilarious. And I always want it to be size 12. So I can do that, and then down here under options, I can say save this as my default styles.
There you go.
So now once I've done it and I do a new doc, it should be set up. And sometimes those settings do take time. It should be set up to where that's my default, but because I just did it, it might not do it right away. I know Google sometimes has to go through those, but that should set it by making that your default style. You should be able to set it up that way. But I know that's taken a while sometimes for that to come through, of course.
Fine, thanks.
I think you can click on that normal text, and at the bottom under that default styles, you can say use my default style. I don't know if you have to manually go in and say, use what I've set as default.
I didn't think so, but possibly. And maybe that's a setting we can mess with too and get back to you.
I'm just super efficient. I go in and change it every time. One, because I never seem to pick the same font. I have usually like, this is my go-to for like a couple weeks, and then I get tired of that one and I change it. So, but yeah, I think you can maybe hack your way around to make that happen.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to show like 2 quick things, and then we're going to go to a break here really quick.
Perfect.
So the first one, now that you are starting to get more content in your Drive, I really didn't talk about in Drive itself, this ability to find the file that you're looking for. I would hate to tell you how many files are inside of my Drive. I was trying to find a way to search it. It's in the tens of thousands, I'm certain of it at this point. My organization structure is I organize by not organizing. And I really mean that because Google at its core was built around the idea of searching. So if I need to find a file, I have this search bar here, and maybe I know a specific file I'm looking for. I have no idea what I called it or what Derek called it because he created it or whatever. There's a little drop down in your search here where I can say exactly what I'm looking for. So I can say, you know, I knew that Derek shared it with me, and it was about eDoctrina. So I might say, Derek, I don't even remember if that was in the name of the file or not. So it just has the words eDoctrina in it. And I can search, and that's going to show me every file, whether it's a Google Slides or a doc that Derek created, shared with me, that's about eDoctrina. So I use the search inside of Google all the time. If I come into a staff meeting and I get into my docs by saying full staff and then find my full staff meeting notes. I use this search feature every time I get into docs to find what I want. I have no idea what folder I put anything into or what folder somebody shared with me and has files in. There's just so many files at this point that I tend to use the search more than I do anything. And then with that, we're going to move to a break because even in this time when we're sitting on our screens this whole time, we need to take a little break. And I'm going to take a 5-minute timer. I'm going to show you one helpful hint in the Google world here. So even in these e-learning type environments, I like to use visual cues with my students. I'm going to do a 5-minute timer. This is just a YouTube video, and I'm actually just on YouTube right now. But I don't want my students to be distracted with everything else on YouTube. In Chrome, I'm using a feature here called Turn Off the Lights. So I can actually just click this little light bulb and it turns the lights off and everything else. So then my students aren't distracted. They know they have 5 minutes. There's a ton of 5-minute timer YouTube videos out there. So I'm gonna give you 5 minutes to take a stretch break, do what you need to. And when we come back, we're gonna jump into Google Forms, which is one of my favorites. So we'll see you in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. Okay, we'll come back now. I use those visual timers a lot during sessions. A lot of times it's to give me some accountability as well. So I often say 5-minute break, and then I go off and somebody asks me a question. I don't remember how long I've been on break. So I use those for my accountability and for my students as well. Okay, so now we're going to get into Google Forms, which are by far one of my favorite things to use inside of Google. A Google form is the ability for you to capture content. That could be using it as a quiz, where if you want to ask a bunch of questions and get all of their responses, or maybe it's something like you're doing a t-shirt order form for a club that you sponsor, where you can use Google Forms for a variety of different pieces. We're going to jump into that. In the chat, Kate did put a link to that Google Chrome extension about turn off the lights. So if you want to use that with YouTube videos, you're welcome to use that. But now inside of my Google Drive, and I'm just making sure I'm in the right Google account here. There we go. I'm going to go in and I'm going to create a Google form. So I'm going to click on new. Oops. It's acting goofy on me. There we go. New. And Forms is actually down in this More section of Google Forms. Otherwise, I could also type in forms.new if I wanted to create a new one. Now, a Google form has the ability for you to ask a lot of different question types. You can turn your form into a quiz. You can also use your form just to capture data into a spreadsheet. A common form that I often start teachers with, if this is the first form they've ever used, I remember as an elementary teacher, meet the teacher night or back to school, I'd have that little paper that I'd have every family fill out about, oh, tell us the best contact for you, or tell us, you know, some ways that you might be able to help in the class, and what are some of your child's strengths. I can use a form to capture all of that because, like I told you, my whole organization structure, that was the same with papers too. I would organize by not organizing, but I couldn't search through papers to find answers. So in a Google form, everything is captured online and kept in a spreadsheet for me. So I'm going to show you how to create a form, and then we're going to jump in and kind of look at some of the settings with those forms as well. By default, when you start a form, like Kate had with Docs, you get this great name of Untitled. And so we need to make sure we go in and title what that is. I'm going to just make this a parent survey. You might be thinking about a quiz you have in the first couple weeks of school. You could be thinking of a lot of different ways you could use a form, but I'm going to start mine as a parent survey. And when I do that, and I click on Untitled Form in the upper left, it'll automatically grab the title that I have here to make the titles match. Then a form description, you can put in a lot of different pieces here. So this is just a big text field that you can put this in. And I would give them as detailed of instructions as possible in here. Welcome to my class. So I would go detailed as I need to. On a non-school note, I use these all the time. I lead Cub Scouts, and when I'm planning for a camp out, we create a Google form so I know who's coming, how many people are going to be there, and I can use all that in spreadsheet form later on. There's so many different ways to use this. By default, it starts you with one question that is a multiple choice question. As you start to put in your question, it'll oftentimes change what type of question that's going to be. This is a newer Google feature, but it's really a part of that Smart Compose piece. It knows when I ask student name, that should be a short answer question. Depending on what you're collecting, I often like to be as detailed as possible in these questions. And I like to think about how I'm going to get my results later on. A lot of times, this is just a personal preference. If I'm collecting a student's name, I'm actually going to collect it twice. I'm going to collect first name, require that question, and I'll talk about that in a second, and then require last name. The reason I do that is because all of this content comes in a spreadsheet, and I know that if I say put in your name, last name comma first, or just say name. I'm going to get a lot of different varieties of name, and I like to be able to sort that spreadsheet and use my Google Sheets to its full potential later on as well. So I collect first name and last name separate. You'll notice as I did that, I clicked this little required checkbox. You can have questions, especially in like a survey type scenario, that are completely optional. So if you have an optional question, you can uncheck required and they don't have to do it. By default, all questions are not required, so you have to require that question. If you have a question that you really like how you worked on it and you built that question in a good way, you can duplicate it as well. That'll just have it come a second time. So maybe on first name and last name, I could have just duplicated it and typed in the word last name. If I don't want that question, I can just hit this little trash can that will delete it. To add more questions, there's a plus sign right here. And when I click on that plus sign, it just puts in another question. And I kind of want to talk through what these different question types are. Now, I'll just kind of start from the top and go down. This is the longest I'll spend talking about all these question types, I promise you. Short answer is usually reserved for 1 or 2 word answer, right around 140 characters. Think about if it fits in a tweet, it fits in a short answer, basically. Paragraph allows for up to 5,000 characters to be entered. So in a paragraph answer, it gives them a larger text box to type in their responses. Multiple choice allows for your students or your user to select one answer, and you'll see this little radio button that's here. Checkboxes allows for your student or whoever's using it to select more than one answer. So anytime you want them to select more than one, use checkboxes. And then drop down allows for your user to select one, but it makes it a little drop down list instead of just a bunch of bubbles that they can pick from. I do drop downs often to clean up the space of the form. If there's 20 different choices for an answer, I don't want there to be that much real estate taken up on the screen, so I'll use the drop down. Oftentimes, if you think of online forms you may have filled out a drop down when it's asking even like what state you live in. Those kind of pieces come in. A file upload is simply that. It asks for the user to upload a file. So maybe you're doing a project with students and you want them to upload a finished file into their assignment to turn in. You can do a file upload here. A linear scale question is one of those, like on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate this? Multiple choice grid. On a multiple choice grid, it creates a grid with different answers that they can pick from on it. And then you also have a checkbox grid. I honestly haven't used these grids as much. Kate, in what capacity or what ways have you seen the grid questions used?
Sometimes kind of that same linear scale, but may I have multiple things. So like, for example, tell me your comfort level with docs, sheets, slides, and then the columns across the top would be very comfortable, not very comfortable. Really, and so it's just kind of that row and column kind of thing. And then I think checkbox means that they can select more than one thing in a column, I think. And then the multiple choice means they can only select one.
So I'm just creating one quick so we can kind of see what it looks like.
And usually when I do these, I put them in there and then I view the form so I can see what it's going to look like. Because right now where Robbie is, he's kind of behind the curtain. This is not what your end user who's completing it sees. And so a lot of times I will view it so I can make sure that I've got it looking like I want it to look. So I constantly have to double check on these just because seeing it how you build it, my brain doesn't work that way.
Yeah, so like I should probably build this the opposite way. And that's the same thing as we're in these forms. I will say Google Forms has been getting some updates lately. So some of those pieces are newer. So I'd probably put Google Docs, Sheets, Forms here, and then the great, okay, terrible here. So I could kind of move it around. Or if I need it in a different order, there's these little drag handles that I can move my order here. So I'm going to delete that one because it's not the question I want right now. The other two question types are date and time entry questions. So if you need a specific date, you can have a date question. It's going to ask them the month, day, or year. And then you can also have a time-based answer as well. So lots of different question types. In this kind of an example of a parent survey, you know, I might have you know, I've got the student's first name and last name. Maybe I want something like, you know, their favorite subject. And then I can put in my different options. Et cetera, et cetera. I also have on a lot of these questions, you'll see the option here to add other. So it's like, hey, you forgot to say one. I need an other option. We can always put that in there as well. And I've required this question. Now next to required, you'll see the 3 dots there. And if I click on the 3 dots, I have a couple pieces that I can work with. Each question has a few different pieces that you can use. The first one on all of them though is description. So sometimes the question you have actually needs a little bit more discussion or description on there. So I can click on description. And so I can be a little bit more detailed exactly what I'm looking for. We'll talk a little bit later about this go to section based on answer. That's more of a Google Forms 201 kind of thing, but we'll talk about it. And then if you are doing an assessment in Google Forms, especially on a multiple choice, you're going to see this option here to shuffle the option order to where you might be asking a multiple choice question and you want to shuffle it so the kid next to each other, they can't see each other's answers and see what they're answering really quickly. So you can shuffle the option order. If you're making an assessment and doing that, just remember to not say all of the above because it will shuffle and that answer might be the top option and nothing will be above it. So just remember how if you're going to use that, that feature is there. So you can add questions and then you'll see these other pieces that you can bring in here. Import questions I haven't seen used as much, but if you have questions on other forms, you can bring in questions from other forms that you might want to use in this form. Under here, you can add in a title. So maybe I want a section here. I use title a lot, honestly, for like reading assessments where I'm going to put in a small passage for them to read and then answer the next questions on. So I might put the passage here, and actually the whole text of the passage would be here. And I might use something in that title saying, using this reading passage, answer the next 3 questions. You can use title a lot of different ways to organize your content. When I click off of it, you'll see that it just shows up without a question, just has the content that I put there. I also can add in images. So I can bring in a picture from my computer. I can do a Google image search. And so I might go in and I might pick this image here. It will ask for an image title. That's an optional piece. And you can also say how you want to align that if you want it centered. Again, that's just a visual piece. Hover text is, if you have any students with visual impairments, you can put hover text, and if they hover over, their screen reader will read that out loud to them, whatever that image is. Oftentimes I use images in an assessment so I can refer to it. So I can say in the next question, I might say, you know, in the image above, what color is Nebraska? And then I go in. And so now I can ask them those types of questions. You can use images for a lot of different things. If you're sponsoring a club, you might be ordering shirts and you want to put in the images, pictures of the shirts on there. You can do that, so they just have them as a reference as well. You can add in videos. By adding in a video, it's bringing in a YouTube video right into your form so they can watch a video and then you can ask a few questions about that video. And the last one on here is section. So sometimes you're going to take an assessment or you're going to take a form that's going to take you to some different pieces. I can add in a section. I'm going to call this one yes. And I'm going to add another section called no. Now up in this first piece, I'm going to add in a question. I'm going to call it volunteering. I'm going to require this question, but in my description, I'm going to say, are you interested in volunteering this year? Yes and no. Notice it suggested a no once I put in a yes. And then here, I can go in and I can say, after the selection, what should we do here? I have it as checkboxes, that's why it's acting goofy. It needs to be a multiple choice. And now I can say go to section based on answer. So now if they answer yes, I can have it go to our yes section. And if they answer no, it's going to go to our no section. In yes, I might ask some more questions here. So I might go in and say, oh, I need to know parent name. You know, how have you volunteered in the past? And then in the no section, I might just put in a description there and say, you know, thanks for supporting your student at home. And I can add in other questions that I might still have. So you can really help guide your user as they're going through this and not have to click through a bunch of questions that they don't need to answer as well. So right now our form here has 3 sections. And you'll notice after yes, by default, it wants to go to this no section, but I don't want them to go to that. That doesn't pertain to them. I can say after you're done with the yes section, submit the form, you're done. And then I need to add at least one question to no. And I might add a question here about like additional questions for class. And I would clarify and say, do you have any additional questions for me as a teacher? How can I help you this year? And then since this is the last section here, there is no after section. It's just assuming after the last section that it's going to submit the form. So we've built a form now. And again, these can be assessment type questions. If you're inside of Google Classroom and you say you want to add an assessment, it's going to build a form for you. And we'll look at how we can make any form an assessment here in a second. But now I want to start to kind of look at some of the settings of this. The first setting that people often want to change is the color. So this little artist palette that's right here gives me some theme options. I can choose a picture to put at the top of my form. So maybe I have one that is something about what we're doing in class, or maybe I just find a picture that I want to use. When you bring in that picture, it'll use the picture to help build your theme, and it will use colors that are coordinated to the picture that Google has there. You can pick kind of how you want that to look once you've brought in a picture. And you also have a few choices here on fonts that you might be able to use based on the theme that you pick as well. So that little artist palette does give you some theme options. Next to that is the add-ons. Kate started to talk a little bit about add-ons inside of Google Docs. Looks like there's one add-on that you could use right now called Form Notifications. So if you want to use that, you can. This little eyeball, this is what, when Kate was saying I was kind of acting behind the curtain and to see what it's going to look like for my user. If you click this little eyeball, this is exactly how your user would interact with this. These Google Forms are built in a way that support a mobile environment. So if they're on a smaller screen, it's just going to move it and let them see it on a smaller screen if they're on their mobile phone or whatever. Or if they're on a computer, they would see it kind of in the center of that page. You'll notice that when I click that eyeball, it opened up a completely new tab. So to get out of my preview, I have to close that tab. And then like our other settings have been, settings in Google Forms is inside of this gear. By default, every form will require your user to be a Weeping Water account. Now, if you're sending this out to parents or the community, you want to make sure you uncheck that. You will know if they can't do it really quickly. If you send it out to parents, you'll start getting responses real fast if that box hasn't been unchecked. You can collect their email addresses if they're logged into Google or logged into their Weeping Water account. It'll automatically collect their email address if you want it to. You also have the ability to do response receipts, so they can get an email of their response if you want to. You can decide if your respondent can edit after they submit or if they can see a summary. So I've used this in a couple different ways, the summary piece. Just a quick vote in my class sometimes I would do on a quick Google form, what's the next read aloud book I should do in class, and have 4 choices there. And after they hit their vote, they're gonna see a summary of all the votes that have come in. So you could have summary if you want that. Google does a really great job with all the data that comes in and creating summary charts of all the data that's coming in. And then if you want them to be able to edit after submitting, so oops, I forgot to do that, I need to go back, you can check this box. The next tab in your settings is a couple presentation pieces. If you have multiple pages, one nice thing to do for your users is to show a progress bar. This will say you're 25% done with this form, you're halfway done, and it will kind of guide them through. If you're doing an assessment, you can shuffle the question order. This will shuffle every question order though, so be cautious. So where we ask first and last name right away, it could make that first name question number 2 and last name question 30. Just be careful if you're using that shuffle question order. And then by default, it always has show link to submit another response on there. So that's after they hit submit, it'll say, thanks for responding, or your response has been recorded. Do you want to submit another one? You can uncheck that, especially if you do an assessment, you probably don't want that. By default, any Google form has a response on here or a confirmation message. After they hit submit, it says your response has been recorded. From a classroom management side of things, I really like to use the confirmation message to give my students their next direction. If I'm doing this as an assessment in class, or I'm trying to get my students to even just take that quick survey about what our next book is going to be, on the confirmation message, I'm going to tell them what to do next in class. So then I can say, thanks for voting for our book. Please get out your writing assignment and proofread. So I'm giving them some directions. With parents, if I'm having a parent survey, I'm gonna go in here and say, thanks for taking the time to do this. If you need anything this year, here's my email address. Please feel free to reach out. I use this confirmation message a lot to help deliver that message. Sometimes in this environment where I've been creating a lot of Zoom sessions, I use this to say, thanks for registering. Here's your Zoom ID for the next session. Give them those little carrots in that confirmation message too, that they can go after and use. So confirmation message can be really helpful. And then if you're gonna make it a quiz, you can use this quizzes tab here. So if this is going into Google Classroom, or you're using this to make some kind of an assessment, you can make it a quiz. And then this is gonna give you some other features here. So if they're using a Chromebook, we can turn Chromebooks on. Otherwise, it's when is a student gonna see their grade and what can they see? Now, if you make it a quiz, and I'm gonna leave mine a quiz just to show you something that happens to your form. When you make it a quiz, some other settings end up changing on your form as well. If you were in our classroom session last Friday or on Monday, we talked about how forms can become quizzes. And if you do that inside a classroom, they automatically check this box and have you set and ready to use it as a quiz. So those are a few settings you can use. Now, once I've made this a quiz, you'll notice that in my answers or in my questions that I ask, I now have an answer key. So if I'm using this for a quiz, I can click on answer key and say, oh, this is the right answer, and here's how many points it's worth. So then as they take it, it's going to use that to grade it. You'll see we have an answer key where we can actually type in a correct answer on a short answer question as well, by just going in and typing in the correct answer, which of course there's a correct answer on last name. You can also give feedback if there are answers as well. So I'm gonna close that out. Okay, so Google Forms, I've really gone through it quickly here, but what I want you to know is it's super powerful. And the more you start to explore Google Forms, the more you're going to see how you can use that content. Now, I will show you the responses tab here. In responses, we have this ability to see all the responses that came in. I'm going to quickly take this just so you can see what responses look like. Getting that one right. And yeah, I'm interested in volunteering. So when I hit yes, you'll see that it brings me to this tab, and I'm going to submit. Because it's an assessment, I have a view score button, but what I really want to do is see my responses. Excuse me. In responses, it's going to show me, because it's a quiz, it shows me my responses a little bit differently, but it gives me a summary, tells me who's put it in, and then all their responses that have come in. If it's multiple choice, you're going to see this ability here to have like graphs of all the answers that were selected. You'll see that we'll put in pie charts. I have one parent who's interested in volunteering. 100% of my participants said that it was red. So I can see this different feedback in here as well. With responses, the other thing you can do is create a Google spreadsheet or Google Sheet from your responses. So if I click on create a sheet, it'll create a brand new Google Sheet that will then open in a new tab and keep all of my responses in there. I use Google Forms for just about everything. I collect a lot of content on here. When I'm doing instructional coaching in a building, I have forms set up to know what I did in that classroom when I was in that classroom. So then I can go back to my spreadsheet and look, here's how many times I met with teacher X. And I can go back and see what are the things we've talked about, what are the problems we've worked through this year. I really see a lot of valuable ways that we can collect data and use it with Google Forms. Because of how nice that it gives these summaries, I feel like I can use the data that's coming into these forms quickly and efficiently as well. So with that, are there any questions on Google Forms?
Robbie, I had a couple of things. One, up there in the responses tab, when you guys have a form, you can turn off accepting responses. Like if you're doing a t-shirt order form, and let's say the ordering deadline is, today at 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, you can go on and say, I'm not taking any responses anymore. So when people click on that form that they got emailed 2 weeks ago, now when they go on like, oh, sorry, we're not taking orders, we'll do this again in the winter or something like that. So you can do that so you don't get any of those late orders if you're not willing to take them anymore. And then the other thing, back on questions, that image thing, you can insert images in the question. You can also insert images in your answer choices. So if you are a primary teacher, this can be great for you, for those kids that are still emerging readers. If you have a very text-heavy quiz, they're not going to be able to really do that as independently. So if you'll notice where Robbie's got his cursor, there was a little image button at the end of that answer choice or in the question. And so you can insert an image. So maybe you, say, what's the triangle? And you put a bunch of different pictures down at the bottom, and one of them's a triangle, one of them's a square, and one of them's a circle, and they have to pick. So you can put images in questions. You can put images by themselves. You can put images within questions. You can put images within answer choices. And what I love about this, you can also put text. So maybe you put the picture of a triangle and you type triangle, the word triangle, so they kind of get that association between, this is what the word looks like when it's spelled, this is what it looks like as an image. And so you can do that. So I know that we had some primary teachers in here. That can be very helpful. But as a high school teacher, I would use it, hey, we narrowed down our t-shirts for this year to these 3 choices, pick the one that you like the best. And I put the image of the t-shirts in the question types, and that could be a way that they give feedback on that. So not just for quizzes, but yeah, that's what that image one looks like.
Awesome. Yeah, I forgot to cover that. Thank you, Kate.
Not a problem. Any other questions?
Hey, Kate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there a way to add a voiceover then to the images as well? Robbie's shaking his head no.
Not right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's not even a real great hack. I mean, if you, no.
There's
Not yet.
no audio options right now inside of Google Forms.
In Forms at all. Okay.
The long
I will say
workaround
though,
would be
there's
to make a
that
YouTube
question mark
video.
down there. You can always give that as feedback.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They do take that feedback well.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So yeah, that'd be a great suggestion, actually. Okay. All right. With about 20 minutes or so that we have remaining, wanted to go over Google Slides with you. And if we can get to it, Sheets, but if we need to push that one off to later, that one's pretty straightforward. If you're familiar with Excel, it's like the 2% version of Excel, if Excel is whole milk there. So I am back in Drive. To get to Slides, if I click on New, Slides is right there. In the same way as the other tools, I can also get there by going to slides.google.com. I can get there by going to slides.new and just get a brand new one. I can go to slide.new. Any of those ways I can get a new Google slide presentation. So if I just click on Slides, it gives me this untitled presentation. And what you will notice about this is that it looks very Google Doc-y. It's got the same kind of layout. You'll notice, it gives you that helpful untitled presentation. So I can rename it, all those things. That saving icon is there, the star, the moving. You'll notice the menu choices are very similar, formatted the same. You've got your toolbar. I've got my share button up here. And if I click on that, those share settings look the same as they do in Google Docs. So once you start figuring out things like Docs, there's some things that cross amongst all of them. And you notice I have this side panel over here. So all of that is still the same. A couple of unique things. When you first start a presentation, it gives you a chance to pick the theme. I'm just going to close that. I can pick one later. But you notice I have that explore feature. We'll talk about that one in a second because it does have an enhanced little bit here in Slides. All my thumbnails of my slides are here on the side. And I can kind of be in this editing mode, or if I want to see a grid view of all my slides, I can see them, which right now I've got one, so there's not a whole lot, but I can kind of toggle back and forth. The slide here in the middle is the one I'm actually working on right now. And it's very similar to PowerPoint. You had your thumbnails on the side, you had the slide that you're working on there. A couple of things I want to point out. You do have the speaker notes down here, and if you need to, you can make that bigger or smaller. You can also say view, and you can uncheck speaker notes. So if you don't even want to see it, it doesn't need to take up screen real estate if you don't want it to. Okay, so let's just start diving in. I'm going to add a title. Okay, so now I've got my title slide. If I do want to set my theme, I can always go to it here. I know it showed it to me when I opened it, but I wasn't ready yet. So I can always pick on theme, and they give me some. So maybe I pick this one, and it will kind of apply that theme for me. When I'm ready to add a new slide, here's the little plus button. I will point out here and in Google Docs and in Sheets and all those kind of things, when you see something on the toolbar, if you see a little drop-down arrow next to it, highly encourage you to click on that drop-down arrow, because then you get some more options. So when I want to add a slide, these are all the kind of slide formats that I can use. Same here. Let me add one here. And I can add, so there's my information there. I'm gonna click out of there. And so now when I'm back here, I can always click on layout. And so I can click that little drop down. So anytime you see those drop down, highly encourage you to click on that so you'll see more options. When I'm in Slides, same thing when I was in Docs, when I click on anything, if I click on this text box, you'll notice that my toolbar up here changes because I'm in a text box. It gives me some text editing things. If I go back here, now I'm back to the main one. I can add an image. So let's say I'm going to search the web. Penguins are, I'm a fan. So I can click on the picture and say insert. And it puts my picture there, and I can kind of rearrange it. You'll notice as I'm moving things, you can see these little guidelines that kind of help me. So it just helps me so I can line things up. So you'll see those red lines can help me align things. And you'll notice as I have a picture selected, now my toolbar changes. I can crop the image. So if I don't want as much of this blue space at the top, I can crop that out and then just click the crop button and it gets rid of it. But you'll notice I have this drop down arrow here. So I can click on that. I can actually make the shape. So let's say I'm going to go in here, I'm going to pick a heart. And so it basically kind of masks it and puts that picture in the shape that I've got it there. So now instead of just a square picture, I've got a heart. So you can do all those kind of things. So like I said, look for that drop down arrow. You'll notice I have a text box pictured here. I've got a whole bunch more things up there at the top. All right, so let's see some of the other things. In the file menu, you'll notice some very similar things. You've got that make a copy still. And if you want to make a copy, you can make a copy of the entire presentation, or let's say you just say, I just want slides 2 and 3. So let me add a couple more slides here. So we've got some things, and this is point 2. Okay, and let's say I just want the second and third slide. So if I click on those and I use my command key to select more than one, then I click on file and I can say make a copy of just the selected slide. So I don't have to take all of them if I don't want to. You'll also notice I've got the download. So I can download this as a PowerPoint if I want to use it in PowerPoint. I can download it as a JPEG. So maybe I just want this slide to be a JPEG. So an image file that I can use. I can do that. I can download my slides as a PDF. Any of those kind of things, I've got some download options. So you'll notice some of those adjust based upon what tool you're using. You've got one I do want to point out here. Let me get that toolbar out of the way, is this page setup. Just in a similar way to docs, you don't have to limit yourself to the standard slides. So maybe if I go into custom, if I'm doing something like a newsletter, many times if I want to put text boxes and images and things, and I kind of want to have things a little bit, kind of have that desktop publishing feel, I'm probably going to use slides. And instead of it being the standard slide, I'm going to go 8.5 by 11 and say apply. And now my slide size is a piece of paper size. And so I could be putting things and I can layer things a little bit more, and it's just a little bit cleaner as I want to add things. So if I want to kind of take this and put it to the side, I can do that, and it's a little bit easier to do there here as opposed to in docs. But if I want to put a text box, I can put a text box, and so I can rearrange those kind of things. And the nice part, if I have it like this, now I go up to file and I say download, I can download it as a PDF. I can email that out to parents, and they can easily bring that up no matter what device they have, because that's a pretty universal file type. So highly encourage. I use a lot of times where I just have a 1 slide presentation and it's an 8.5 by 11 and I'm making a flyer or something like that in here. So that's just a little bit different usage that I've used slides for. Or I've seen some teachers that do file and they do page setup and they will do kind of 14 by 11. And now they could kind of zoom in a little bit and kind of make use of the space on their screen. So you've got all that. Here, let me go to 20 by 14. Okay, and so you can kind of see, it just makes it a little bit bigger so you can kind of play around with that and kind of take advantage of some of that screen real estate there. Some other things in the view, if you don't want those guides to be showing as you're moving things around, or you don't want that snap to kind of things, you can adjust that, because sometimes those are awesome and sometimes they are frustrating for sure. So you can decide whether you want those. In the insert menu, you'll notice a couple of unique things here. One, you can insert a video into a slideshow and you can embed it right within there. So if let's say if I go to video, I can search for bicycle. Very interesting video about like riding a bicycle with the handles turned around. So I can click on that. I can say select, and then it will embed it right within my document. You'll also notice that I get some playback features. So if I don't want my students to watch the whole thing, I can say I want them to start looking at it at 4 minutes and 30 seconds in. And then I want them to stop watching it 8 minutes in. And so I can kind of have some flexibility and really target what part of the video I want them to watch. And I can make it bigger so they can see it, and it's right there embedded right within the presentation. So right embedded in there. Other things that I can do, I could actually insert audio. This is awesome and it stinks at the same time. This is awesome in that I could have a picture on there and I can put audio that describes what's happening in that picture. The downside, you have to use a third-party tool to create that audio. So you'd have to use something else, get that audio in Drive, and then you can put that file in there. So I think they're working on the ability to capture the audio right within Slides, because I think that's been a common complaint. This is a pretty new feature, so it's still new. So I'm hoping that updates come on that. You'll also notice you can put in diagrams. So if you have like an organizational chart or something like that, you can put those kind of things in there. You've got word art here. You also still have commenting. So if I have this here and I highlight this, highlight this or anything, or even if I pick this picture, I have this comment button and I can make a comment. And so I can comment. So the same way that you can comment on a document, you can comment on slides. So if your students submit slides as their work, you can comment on it in the same way that you do docs. Other things, this arrange menu, I use this all the time in Slides because I can arrange what layers of things are on. So let's say I want to, let me add a text box here. Or no, take that back. Let me add a shape or an arrow. So maybe I put this arrow here and I rotate it so that it's pointing there and I put it here and it's on top of my penguin. But let's say I want it to be behind for whatever reason. Once I have that selected, I can go up to arrange and order and I can say send it back. So I want it to go behind that. So I can decide what's on the bottom layer, what's on the top layer, and those kind of things. And so I can really do that. I can even double click on this shape and type words in it too if I wanted to. Like there's just so many things you can do, and that range allows you to order that. So order is something I use all the time. I can center things and distribute things on the page and those kind of things. And so you'll notice some of those choices are grayed out because I had something selected. So your choices will be dependent upon what it is you have selected. Just some other things. So I've got this presentation. I know a lot of times when I use slides, it's not necessarily to actually present anything. I will have them as a way for students to document their learning and they can send it in. But if you are creating something to use as a presentation, here's that present button. So when you're ready to present, you can present that. Let me add some speaker notes here just for me. When I present, I can just click present and it will show it full screen for everyone. And you'll notice I have this little gray toolbar that shows anytime I move my mouse around. And so I've got some tools there. If I want, I can always get out of this full screen. It will still show it kind of full screen without the editing stuff in my browser window, but you'll notice now you can see my tabs here and I can navigate a little bit. So if you want, you can always do that. I can navigate to the slides here, or if I decide I want to go straight to slide 5, I can do that. I can see my speaker notes. So if I want to do that, you'll notice it has a timer here for me. And I can see my speaker notes. So let me go back to slide 1 that had my speaker notes, I think. Maybe it wasn't that one. But I can see my speaker notes there and I can do in like present and speaker view so that I can see my speaker notes and then my students would see just the presentation. You would need to do some adjustments on your connection between your projector and that. So you'd have to do a little bit of work there, but you could absolutely do that. Other things that you have here, you can turn on this Q&A. And when you turn that on, if I turn it on and say start new, then at the top of my slides, this is what my students would see. And that would be on every slide. They would see this slides.app.goo and then this unique code. If they go to that link, they could actually submit questions. And then I would see them here. You'll notice right now it's limited. They have to be signed into their Weeping Water account. And then I would see them here. When I see questions that they put in there, I can say, oh, that's a good question. I want to show that to everybody. So let me copy. There we go. So this is what that would look like. So that I can say, they can ask it anonymously, so you can decide, but no one else sees this question except you. and they can click submit. And now I'm going to go back to the presentation. There we go. And now I can see that question. And then I can say, ooh, that's a great question. That would be useful for all of us to see. And then so I can put it out there and say, hey, Kate asked a great question. What font did you use? Let's talk about that. And so that could be a great thing to use on the fly. And it could be a great way to get those students that aren't necessarily vocal in the classroom. They could be submitting questions without having to be so extroverted there. And then that is always at the top there if you have that Q&A turned on, or you can turn it off. Let me turn it off. There we go. All right, other things you can do, you can have this little pointer. So as I move my mouse around, it kind of gives that little laser pointer, so you can really emphasize things there with your mouse. You can do some settings. I don't really do a whole lot with that. And then when I'm done, I can exit out of there and get back kind of behind the curtain. So that's kind of slides in a nutshell. You can always get back to the slides home by clicking on this little slides icon in the upper left-hand corner, or go into slides.google.com, and it kind of is that same like the docs home. Now I see just my presentations, and I also have this template gallery. So if I click on that, they've got a slide deck that's just for Weeping Water, or they've got just some general ones from Google. So you can see there's a lesson plan, there's a book report one. So just different templates that you can use there. Now, I don't use a lot of their templates. I use other created ones. Ones that I use and love is Slides Carnival is one that I am a huge fan of. They are free PowerPoint and Google Slides templates. So let's say I like this one for whatever reason. I can click on it. I can see what it looks like. It tells me a little bit about it. And I can go through and see different instruction. It tells me how to use it. It gives me different transition pieces. It gives me, if I want to put quotes, it gives me a template for that, all those kind of things. And if I want to use it, I just say, just use Google Slides theme. It's going to show it to me. And then I just have to say, use the template, and it will create a copy of that template for me in my drive. And so it's all, it kind of looks, it makes me look like I have a graphic design background and spent all this time when I didn't. It's created for me. And so and all of these, it's the same format on all of them. They give you a presentation slide. They tell you how to use it. I'm gonna close that. They've got just different template ones. And so if I want to show somebody what it's going to look like on a computer, I can use this one. And if I want to use it, I just right click on it and I say duplicate the slide. And now I've got this one, and I can put my screenshot there. I can say, this is how, whoop. Okay. And they've even got like some icons that I can use, that I can reshape and those kind of things. They do give me a credit slide that you can leave in there just to give them credit and make it all copyright kosher, and give you more information about what fonts that they use, all those kind of things. So Slides Carnival is amazing. The other one I like is Slides Mania. And I think we linked both of these in the agenda document, so you don't have to memorize those. But Slides Mania is awesome. It's kind of becoming my new favorite in that they have a lot more education themed ones. Like they've got a lot of digital organizers, digital notebooks, and they have users that submit these as well. And so like here's a free digital notebook, and it's all set up for you. And so when you click on section 1, it goes to section, so it kind of has some of that branching all set up for you. And so and when everyone had to go remote, they were awesome about having just different planners and organizers. There's a free education digital planner. They just have a bunch of different ones that I absolutely love. And so their education ones have been awesome. And so if you are looking at having to go remote, it kind of helps you organize things, and has things for like, here's the stuff for the week for your students. So they have been amazing with those kind of things. They even have one in here because they have user generated ones. And so there's one that's kind of a Harry Potter-ish theme, and they've got Sesame Street, and they've got, Toy Story looking one. And so just different themed ones that users have submitted. So they are awesome. And then you just click on it, you say you want to use it, you make you use the template, and you've got a copy in your drive that you can use. And these are all free. You just have to leave the credit slide in there to give credit where credit is due. Let's see. Yeah, Google Docu, that would be, I'd put my money on that racehorse, absolutely. I know we have about 2 minutes left, and we really didn't get to Sheets. I will say that Sheets is very Excel-ish. There might be a few things that you can do in Excel that you can't do in Sheets, but I would say for most users, Sheets is just fine. It will do the job. I use Sheets literally all the time, and I use it for things that aren't necessarily number-based either. If I need columns of information, any kind of database kind of thing, I use Sheets. I even use it for text-based things. So maybe if I was reading a book, have my students read a book, they might have a character database in there, and so they could put the character name, they could put what chapter the character first appeared, who are they related to, you know, what kind of things do they want to remember about that character. So you could have you could have an animal database if they wanted to, you know, if they're researching a bunch of animals, and you could make it a collaborative spreadsheet where every student is adding about their animal. Any of those kind of things, you can utilize that. There's also some checkboxes available within Google Sheets, so you can almost make it like a to-do list. So maybe you send your students, here's your weekly to-do list, and you send it in Classroom. You say make a copy for each student, and then as they're finishing things, they can just check it off. So lots of different ways. Yes, I am a Google Sheets nerd. Like, I am nerdy about Google Sheets. I love it. And yeah, so if you're thinking like how I use a lot of tables in Google Docs, there's a lot of times where instead of using tables in Google Docs, I use it in Google Sheets because I can manipulate it so much more, which, you know, you could probably psychoanalyze how I want to manipulate things. But so any questions about anything for today? Thank you, Robbie, for getting that last little bit up. So wanted to give you kind of a little preview. Coming up next is just kind of support throughout this year. There's some August 10th in the afternoon, Robbie and I will be back there doing some Google Classroom and beyond. So a lot of times when you're in these, the questions that you might have don't even occur to you. And so we're coming back. So feel free to kind of play around with any of this stuff. We'll be there to answer questions, kind of talk about, okay, you've got enough to, you know, just to be dangerous. Now let's take it to the next step. We're also available to do some ongoing support throughout the year. Those kind of topics, dates, and formats of anything purposely scheduled, we'll determine that later, and we'll for sure let you know. But on the last slide, and I see Michelle has a question that I will get to here in a second, but because we're 1 minute over, I want to make sure and address this. If you have any questions as things come up, feel free to email us. Yes, Robbie and I think even Derek has a Weeping Water account. I don't know about anybody else, but I don't really check that. So if you want a timely response, my ESU3 email is the way to do that. And well, I'd highly recommend that you memorize Robbie and I's email address. If you don't have that at the ready, but you still want to get in touch with us, if you contact any of your building administrators, you contact Derek, any of those kind of individuals, they can absolutely get you in touch with us. And so many times, a lot of the questions that people have, we can answer those questions with a 2-minute email, or we can always just hop on to a 5-minute Zoom and walk you through how to do something. Or if it's something bigger and we need to come and do some face-to-face, when we can get as face-to-face as we can get right now, we can look at doing those kind of support things as well. And if it's a bunch of you that have a question, we can absolutely do some small group, whole group. I mean, we're going to be literally building this plane as we fly it, so we can absolutely help you out in any way. So Michelle is asking, if we have forms in OneNote, can we transfer those to Google Drive, or do we have to recreate them? That's a great question. I have not tried. I've made forms in Microsoft, but I have not tried to import them to Google. So I don't know if that works with the conversion. I know Word to Docs, Excel to Sheets, and PowerPoint to Slides does a convert. But Michelle, let me play around with that and test that. And let you know. Or if you've got one and you just want to give it a try, I would just say give it a try and see how that works. That is one that I have not played around with. So I will add that to my list of things to investigate, and we will let you know how that works. Any other?
Well, thanks everyone for your time today. If you have questions, reach out to us. We are always here for you, and we are happy to help when we can.
Kate and Robbie, thank you so much for your time and putting this together. I know it's a ton of information, especially for folks who aren't